Alright, Samsung has released a couple of smartphones in the A series this year, but which one of these smartphones should you even consider? Spoiler, there are only two smartphones I recommend here, and you really shouldn't consider the others. My purpose for making this video is to help you guys make an informed purchase decision if you are considering any of these smartphones. So here's the structure for this video. I will give an overview for all the smartphones on this list while comparing them, and that will start with the Samsung Galaxy A02 down to the A72 with their prices. We'll move over to the similarities, and then in the verdict, I'll reveal the two smartphones I think are worth your money. Note that I'm also considering just the vanilla variants of the smartphone so far, and not like the S's or the E's. So without taking much of your time, yo guys, let's get started. So starting with the Samsung Galaxy A02, for $100 or 52,000 Naira, you get 3 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of internal storage, and this is the base smartphone from this year's lineup. If you get the Samsung Galaxy A02, you are getting an Android 10 smartphone, one A02 software-powered Android device with a 6.5-inch IPS display. This is not going to be the brightest smartphone out there, and the device, the Samsung Galaxy A02, is powered by both a 5000 mAh battery and the MT6739W chipset, which is a 28nm chipset, making the A02 one of the worst budget entry-level smartphone you can ever get right now. Now, speaking of which, you get 2 to 4 gigs of RAM, 32 to 64 gigs of internal storage, which is expandable using the dedicated memory expansion slot. For the cameras, you should expect a mediocre performance with a dual configuration at the rear featuring a 13 megapixel main sensor, 2 megapixel macro, and a 5 megapixel front-facing camera with support for up to 1080p video recording for the cameras. The Samsung Galaxy A02 isn't exactly an entry-level smartphone I would recommend anyone gets. Although it is quite cheap, the cameras are poor in terms of the quality. Performance is what it is, very bad actually, and it still retains a micro USB connection in 2021. You can only get the Galaxy A02 smartphone for a kid as your first smartphone. Speaking of kids, the actual entry-level smartphone I would recommend you get a kid right now would be the Samsung Galaxy A12 instead. While it still retains the same display quality as the Samsung Galaxy A02, that's a 6.5-inch IPS display. It also has the same 5000 mAh battery with a 15-watt fast charger. Things are a little better with the processor on here, and that's the Helio P35 chipset. A 12nm chipset or processor, you get Android 11, One UI 3.1, USB-C connection, and a better camera system, which are a 48 megapixel main sensor, 5 megapixel ultra-wide, 2 megapixel macro, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor. The front side has an 8 megapixel sensor. It basically would handle day-to-day activities like a champ and would play heavy mobile games, although not without the jitters. You should expect that from $130 or 68,000 Naira smartphone. That's for the 4 gigs and 64 gigs memory. Did I mention you get USB-C from the A12 and upwards? Yes, you do. While I don't recommend getting the A02, and I recommend you get the A12 for kids' first smartphone, the very Android device I really love and would recommend anyone looking for an amazing entry-level and budget device gets is the Samsung Galaxy A22. Not only does it take the performance up a notch from where the A12 left off, it gives you a 6.4-inch HD Plus Super AMOLED display with a 90Hz refresh rate, now competing with the top dogs on this list. The Helio G80 chipset, which is a mid-range gaming chip and performance-based, is found on here, and the memory configuration goes from 464 to 628 gigs of internal storage. On the camera side of things, it takes the main sensor and the photo quality from the A12, but gives you a better image stabilization for videos, a better 8 megapixel ultra-wide camera, and a better tuned 13 megapixel front-facing camera with better details to the photos too. This is by far one of the best entry-level smartphones I would recommend around $175 or 89,000 Naira, both within the A series and without. Okay, so the Samsung Galaxy A32. What if I told you that this smartphone is basically the Galaxy A22 with just a few changes? Slightly brighter and more resolution in display, Full HD against HD, with in-display fingerprint sensor and Gorilla Glass 5 protection. Slightly more pixel count on the camera system, that's 64 megapixel main sensor, 8 megapixel ultra wide, 5 megapixel macro and depth sensor, and a 20 megapixel front facing camera. And the only really noticeable photo difference is when you punch in or crop in the photos. I can assure you that you would barely or not even notice the difference in camera quality from these two devices. While one can argue that these little changes are worth the extra $50 or 25,000 naira you have to pay, I don't particularly think you should pay that extra bucks. In fact, these devices perform about the same and the same battery. I mean, the A22 saves you more charge with the smaller resolution and brightness. Like I mentioned earlier, around this price point, every dollar really matters. And the Galaxy A22, it's about 90 to 95% what the A32 is. And so I would most likely recommend buyers keep this phone, the Samsung Galaxy A32. So where things get a little crazy is when you pick up the Samsung Galaxy A52. First off, you are getting yourself an amazingly designed and well-built device. Although also made out of plastic as with other devices on this list, the camera module design actually does make a statement. It houses a 64 megapixel main sensor, 12 megapixel ultra-wide, 5 megapixel macro, and 5 megapixel depth sensor. While the front side gives you a 32 megapixel front-facing camera, and both the rear and front can record at up to 4K in resolution. The A52 is basically the A32 and much more. You have an IP67 water and dust resistance rating, the Snapdragon 720G gaming chipset, and up to 6GB of RAM and 128GB of storage. Of course, the Full HD Plus Super AMOLED panel still retains the 90Hz refresh rate and the Gorilla Glass 5 protection. But this time, there is a 4500 mAh battery that can be charged up to 50% in 30 minutes using the 25 watts fast charger included in the box. What more could you have asked for? Well, you could ask me the price. For a similarly spec memory configuration with the A32, that's 6GB and 128GB of internal storage, you can get the Samsung Galaxy A52 in Nigerian stores for around 165,000 naira and about $300 to $350 on Amazon. For a more efficient and better processor, slightly better contrast in the display, better cameras obviously, and a super faster charger, while weighing about the same weight as the Samsung Galaxy A22, I think this is definitely the sweet spot on this list. But before I give you my final and overall verdict as to what the two devices I really do love here are, let's talk about the Samsung Galaxy A72. There is a pattern here. Every device on this table somehow builds upon the former, just making slight incremental changes along the way, and the Samsung Galaxy A72 isn't left out. Just like the A71 from last year, this smartphone, the Samsung Galaxy A72, delivers a massive 6.7-inch Super AMOLED display, Full HD Plus resolution, 800 nits of brightness, which is pretty bright, amazing 90Hz refresh rate, and a Corning Gorilla Glass 5 protection, while also giving you the massive 5000 mAh battery that can be charged up using the 25 watts charger included within the box of the smartphone. You can get up to 8GB of RAM and 128GB of internal storage for the maxed out version of the smartphone. Not forgetting the cameras, this is the best camera system in the A series. 64 megapixel main sensor, 8 megapixel telephoto lens, 12 megapixel ultra wide, and a 5 megapixel macro lens. So about the same camera system as the Samsung Galaxy A52, but with an added 8 megapixel telephoto lens, giving you the more photo zoom options, and performance is about the same as the A52 since they run on the same processor. Well, the difference between the A52 and the A72 would be an 11% more battery power, a telephoto lens, slightly larger display, and that's about it. You see, while there are some similarities between these smartphones across the board, such as retaining the headphone jack for your wired earphones connection, also having USB-C aside the Samsung Galaxy A02, these smartphones here have their differences and hence tend to fit different people's needs. As we have realized, some of the smartphones in this lineup are really close and should be skipped. And hence, here's my conclusion. While these devices all have their various target audiences, I actually would recommend just getting two from this list, the Samsung Galaxy A22 and the Samsung Galaxy A52. You see, I don't really see the reason to pick the A12 while the A22 is out there. I know within this price point, every dollar actually does matter, but getting the Samsung Galaxy A22 for an extra $40 is actually worth that sacrifice, as you get a somewhat better camera experience, obviously better performance, 90Hz refresh rates, which can be seen at the top end of this list. For the more budget-friendly device, I'd say you go get the Samsung Galaxy A22. Now for the higher end, the Samsung Galaxy A52 is simply the perfect device to pick up. Not only is it a lot similar to the spec'd out Samsung Galaxy A72, but $100 extra for just a telephoto lens, slightly larger display, and the discomfort of using this size of smartphone, at least for me, isn't worth it. So go pick the Samsung Galaxy A52 instead. So that's been it. Subscribe if you are new here, hit that like button, and also let me know what you think in the comment section about this video. I honestly would love to hear from you guys. Creed that day.